Companies don't have the incentive to be as responsible as a government institution. Companies don't have the same obligation as a government institution, and companies definitely don't have the capacity to manage AI well. We think that research and development of AI technologies would be limited to government-owned or funded entities. This would include research laboratories directly operated by the government agencies, universities that receive government funding, and private companies that receive direct research grants or are connected with the government. Our stance for this debate is that government ownership allows direct control and regulation with AI development that is in line with public needs and demands. First contention then, about how governments are responsible for limiting research and development in fields that pose significant threats to society. Do you think that research and development in many fields are already limited to government-owned or funded entities for public safety and national security reasons? For example, research on advanced weapon systems or biochemicals are limited to private entities. This is because we recognize a large risk of developing incredibly dangerous technologies and creations that pose a fundamental threat to our existence when the development is not monitored or regulated. We also recognize that they are especially dangerous when in the hands of people who have malicious intent. Governments are the most reliable entities to take charge of these fields of research and development. They are directly responsible for the country's security, safety, and well-being, and are held directly accountable by their people, and are not motivated by profit incentives, making misuse of such technologies far less likely. Also note that artificial intelligence also falls under this category of fields that can pose significant risks to society. There is room for the development of artificial intelligence in incredibly dangerous areas, such as for autonomous, lethal weapons or sophisticated cyber attacks. It is important for such development to be contained so that they do not pose a risk to society and are maintained exclusively under the control of the government. AI is especially dangerous when in the hands of people with malicious intent. For instance, consider how artificial intelligence is already being used to manipulate images and videos through deepfakes, and consider how the misuse of such technology by evil actors will lead to the spread of misinformation or fake images of real people that would be damaging to their sense of human dignity. Therefore, governments should be risk adverse and limit the research and development of AI to government-owned or funded entities. Second contention then on how governments will better be able to protect society for the development of AI. Current social and legal frameworks are ill-equipped to deal with the complexities involved with artificial intelligence and its development. There's very little discussion and consensus surrounding how to deal with various complications associated with AI. There's little consensus on how to address the challenges posed by AI, such as defining what qualifies for quote-unquote human rights. If AI surpasses human intelligence, should it have the same rights? More immediately, who is accountable for road accidents involving self-driving cars? This means that we are unprepared for these issues when they inevitably arise after the introduction of these developments into our society. People immediately face situations where their interests are hurt by AI, and the law is unable to provide them with the protection that they require. Policymakers need to play catch up as they adapt to the new issues that arise, and the laws that are made are reactionary in nature, meaning that they do nothing to protect the people whose interests are already compromised as a result of this. Even while new regulations and policies are introduced in response to those issues that occurred, more developments in AI will continue to come up, introducing even newer issues that policies struggle to keep up with. Governments are better able to prepare for these issues when the research and development of AI is limited to government-owned and funded entities. Governments will have much more information about what developments of AI are expected, and therefore would be able to initiate discourse and make preparations before these developments are introduced into society. Governments will also have more control over how that research and development is conducted and released, allowing the government to slow down the introduction of those technologies if social and legal frameworks are not yet prepared. All of the above means that far fewer people are hurt by the various developments of AI, which is important because governments ought to prioritize the protection of its people from harm over any potential benefits brought by the private development of AI. Proud to propose.
Although there may be temporary side effects, AI can propose solutions to a lot of challenges that humanity currently faces. As an alternative, we support regulatory measures based on risk level or ethical guidelines modeled off frameworks like the EU AI Act or the Singapore's AI governance framework. So, straight on to rebuttals. SAG government stated that corporations have malicious intent, so the government should be responsible because they need to control all these lethal weapons. But we believe that that's just simply irrelevant in this debate, because if you're going to complain about wrong usages of AI, we think that it is a different debate completely out of this motion, because we have to fiat that it is a police deterrence and law enforcement problem. So we believe that government's contentions bring an irrelevant material in this debate. Straight into contentions on how we promote innovation. The private sector will always outperform the government when it comes to AI research in both speed and quality and the diversity of research and application. 3 points of layers of analysis. First, industry outperforms government research for 2 reasons. First, research is dependent on resources, so it's something that private industries have farther greater access to. Second, companies keep each other in check through competition, while bureaucratic structure of government is literally designed to slow down decision making, which is lethal for technological progress. Second, analysis on how there's quality and diversification of research on our side. Even with the same amount of resources, the market provides a natural incentive for innovation through diverse and niche consumer demands. It is not replicated under the government, which has to carefully consider before using taxpayer money on each investment and project, and we believe that this kills innovation. Note that corporate investors accept high risk and high rewards, allowing for flexibility in research, while governments cannot afford to fail and thus only take on safe projects to avoid public criticism. Last, analysis on how the government should not be the actor to forward innovation. Even if governments can and do achieve AI innovation on part with the industry, this is an undesirable outcome for the government. Government has an immediate responsibility to deal with structural issues like poverty or education, and with a limited budget, spending on AI activity means not spending money on these issues. Why is this important? AI innovation in AI ushers a new era of humanity in imaginable ways, like how electricity brought us to a new, better quality of living. As a tool with immense potential to solve global issues like poverty, world hunger, climate change, steps to block AI progress is an inhuman blunder. Going on to our second contention, how centralizing AI under the government is an extremely dangerous step that not only endangers innovation, but also threatens democracy itself. Governments are led primarily by political outcomes. So they're backed by corporate donors and political action committees and party stances, meaning that research becomes dependent on the ever turbulent political tide of events. What does this look like? First, due to constant political deadlock and party impasses due to like parties conflicting with each other, research slows to crawl with inconsistent bursts of support, damaging the quality of research itself, and this is a harm on their side of the house. Most importantly, politically guided motivations steer research in directions that are beneficial to donors and away from areas where corporations currently enjoy dominance, meaning that they rather than getting to breakthroughs in meaningful fields, we continue to reinforce structures that prop up only and exclusively the elites. Even more concerning is that the far-reaching effects of future governance. AI is vast, sweeping, and omniscient on scale and comparable to technology we've seen in the past. With a monopoly on AI and oligopoly in AI, good governments will be worryingly powerful and bad governments will be unstoppable. We've already seen in history about the powerful use of AI would be oppressing populations. Just look at China, where the CCP relies on AI technology to track down and control its populations and political dissenters, or Russia, Iran, where AI is heavily utilized to silence and repress opposition. We believe that this is critical because, first, the scale and magnitude of the people brutally oppressed under all-powerful totalitarian regimes is very extreme, with entire demographics suffering from algorithmic authoritarianism. Second, even for governments that are currently relatively liberal, political shifts make bad regimes an inevitable question for when, not if, putting our future generations in perilous danger. Under a government-led AI system, not only do we turn AI into a political tool, but we also permanently endanger democracy for future generations, leaving a bleak future. And this is why we're so proud to oppose. Thank you.
Criminals control a destructive machine, we cannot have companies research AI. Companies unfit for this arsenal cannot use this for their malicious intent. Straight on for rebuttals, they first claim there are other ways to regulate AI. However, a blanket ban on private R&D in AI is necessary because the existing regulatory frameworks for private sector AI development have proven insufficient. Accountability is far greater under government control as public institutions are directly answerable to their constituents. Governments face pressure to ensure transparency, accessibility, and ethical practices, while private companies operate with profit as their primary motive, often at the expense of public welfare. But secondly, private companies also create barriers to accountability. They limit consumer oversight by monopolizing markets, catering to the wealthy, and using sophisticated marketing to obscure potential harms in their systems. Consumers cannot opt out or boycott when they dominate the market and restrict access to benefits. And under government control, the public has a direct channel to influence policy and demand adjustments in democratic societies, ensuring AI systems are designed for the collective good rather than financial interests of a few corporations. Then they also say that governments would only take on safe projects, but we would say that the risk assessment is symmetric to companies as well, because both actors would invest more or actually like try to do projects that have a good chance of succeeding and not do this to projects that don't have a good chance of succeeding. But then we would also not have governments take on random unnecessary projects that have high risks and high returns, because we think that if they're going to play it safe on these, it would actually be better in the long term, as they would not have the chance of losing out on immense funding, which is just better for the direction of development in the first place. Then they also claim this point of political deadlock and research slowing with inconsistent bursts of funding. But we'd say that slowing down innovation is a trade-off that we're willing to make. It prioritizes safety, equity, and sustainability. The rapid pace of AI development creates significant risks, including the generation of massive energy demands, ethical oversights, and disproportionate power held by a few corporations. Companies often struggle to regulate AI at a pace that matches its development, leading to unchecked consequences such as biased algorithms, privacy violations, and environmental harm, along with everything that we've already proven in first speaker. But by the way, the previous speaker did not respond to these points about the government being the most reliable and fit actor to set regulations on these, instead of them just having to basically play catch up with these companies doing it first. And so these points still stand. But then lastly, moving on to our third argument, that developments in AI technology would be far more accessible. AI technology, when developed by the private sector, is often made inaccessible to most of the public. Developers have the strongest incentive to hike the prices of technology in order to gain profit. Technologies using AI that are developed by private entities are often kept locked behind patents and intellectual property, ensuring that the developers are able to keep the technology from being used by the public. And this means that the most vulnerable, also the people who would likely have the most to gain from this technology, would often be the least likely to ever access such developments. When technology is developed through governments or through government funding, however, it's far less likely to be locked behind paywalls, as governments are held accountable to the demands of the public as opposed to profit incentives. We concede our approach may result in slower development and lower quality AI in the short term, but as we previously said, this trade-off is one we actively support as it prioritizes accessibility. Currently, AI advancements are often driven by tech companies and individuals prioritizing flashy products like expensive glasses of AR that remain out of reach for the average consumer due to these costs. In contrast, our approach focuses on AI development that is for the public good and aligned with government interests to ensure accessibility. Moreover, history shows that even technologies beneficial to the public require substantial intervention from the government to become widely accessible. Like the push for EVs necessitated significant interest in infrastructure, charging stations, and policies to counterbalance entrenched industries like the defunding of oil. And AI development geared toward accessibility will also need robust public funding and regulation to ensure widespread adoption and benefit. This means that on our side, there's a stronger incentive for the government to focus on and heavily invest in AI products that align with the public interest. By proactively guiding AI development, we ensure that it serves societal needs and complements existing systems. In contrast, on the opposition side, AI regulation is primarily retroactive, often responding to harm after the fact, as these policies cannot catch up fast enough if they're not regulating them in the first place from the get-go. This approach not only risks exacerbating inequality, but can also be disruptive to traditional institutions that lack the resources or time to adapt to unregulated, profit-driven advancements. Thank
you. That most of the AI development are used to generate profit from the company, not to hurt people. But even if that is true, those things can be prevented without limitations, meaning that we have police and legal laws that already ensures the misuse of AI. You go to jail if you hurt people. The companies have no incentive to take the risk and misuse. That is simply uncharitable for a government to fiat, opposite the government to fiat that, oh, you have the AI technology that actively hurts people. That is simply not true. It is their burden to prove why we necessarily have to explicitly limit it, but we have an alternative and organic change already going on. Second, they never specify the problem because they keep telling us, yo, AI brings detrimental harms to society without giving us specific harms in the first place. We think that's just a big strategic flaw. But second, that they throw us random harms such as, oh, this is bad for the environment, oh, this is bad for energy, and this is bad for the whole privacy or other things. They have to give us a clear mechanism. They can't just throw us impacts without mechanization. First, let's talk about innovation. Government tells us that government have the incentive to make development. Sure, but the important issue is not whether they have the incentive to make development or not, but it's rather on, do they have the incentive to make development quickly or not? Because we already have told you that pressing and urgent problems like climate change and poverty can be tackled with AI development. Government's burden is not to prove how they still have development. It is rather to prove how government can develop at a speed that can tackle urgent problems that require immediate need. James already told you in his speech why government development is either too slow or just inefficient from the get-go of today's debate. Government just can't come to the podium saying that, oh, government can do the same thing without actually proving how. Then they tell us, hey, government's company's purpose and the society's goal will not lie. And then they tell us, oh, the democratic program of voting and other public opinion allows citizens to represent
their own thoughts to the government's process of making AI development. Note that this is safe for the company, meaning the company also operate with profit, meaning that if they want to generate profit, they have to do something that is good for the society, meaning that companies just can't randomly develop something that is either bad for the citizens, they have to develop something that is good for the citizens, which also means that the society's goal is likely to align with the company's purpose as whole. That is simply a wrong fact coming from government. With that said, third constructive on accessibility, this counters their third argument. First level is within the borders. Don't let proposition get away with a case that says private corporations keep technology inaccessible. In the AI industry, competition is a powerful force. The widespread appeal of AI has driven private companies to create services like ChatGPT, Bard, Claude, and Gemini, all competing to be relevant. This competition ensures pricing remain low, while government lack external pressures to keep services affordable because they act as a sole provider in the nationalized system. Government research to serve government purposes, primarily in areas like defense or infrastructure. Private industry, however, focus on the users. This also counters their argument. This is why NASA focuses on exploration with little immediate impact on everyday lives, while SpaceX, a private company, is actively working towards commercial space tourism. For private corporations, user data itself is a critical resource for ongoing R&D. The more users they reach, the more they can improve their products. This is why the majority of advanced AI models, like large language models, are available for free or at a low cost. Accessibility isn't just a feature judge, it's the foundation of their business strategy. Second level on exacerbating the global disparities. Nationalization of the AI industry locks out the developing world. Nationalized AI systems focus on domestic priorities, sidelining the unique challenges of developing nations. Without the resources to compete, these nations are excluded from advancements like AI-driven precision farming, which private companies have made accessible in undeserved market. Governments monopolizing AI are likely to hoard advancements as national access, deepening disparities. In contrast, corporations like Google and Microsoft share AI tools globally, bridging gaps that governments simply cannot. We see that the open source AI community thrives on international cooperations. Nationalized systems reduce these incentives, prioritizing national self-interest where shared ethical standards and equitable access. If opposite governments still worried about privacy, we can easily weigh that with the problem that we give to you. We weigh on the impact. That is why we take today's debate home.
If we are able to sustainably, ethically, and safely develop AI on our bench, we are completely okay with not having 10 different versions of the same AI made by different companies because they were incentivized by market factors and competition factors. Clarifications quickly then. They claim that we don't provide clear mechanisms to how companies developing AI actually has harms to energy economy, etc., etc. So here are the mechanisms that we already mentioned in Deputy but were not responded to. First, technologies using AI that are developed by private entities are then locked behind patents and intellectual property rights or whatnot, ensuring that developers are able to keep the technology from being used by most of the public, and that the people from poverty could benefit most from the technology would not be able to access it. Even if some versions are made free, there will be better versions or beta versions that are not made accessible for the poor people because there has to be some way for these companies to make money. So it's not right for opposition to reject this characterization, but rather they have to tackle how companies would be able to reduce this rich-poor disparity. In addition, AI advancements are often driven by tech companies and individuals prioritizing high-tech products like expensive AR glasses and whatnot that remain out of reach for the average consumer due to the very high costs. In contrast, our approach is focused on the AI development that is for the public good and aligned with government interests to ensure the accessibility for everyone universally, regardless of their rich and poor disparity. Now, they also talk about how innovation should be quick. This is already a rejected characterization, no thank you, from my Deputy Speaker. The slight slowing down of innovation is something we're willing to trade off as it prioritizes accounted things for rapid, unaccounted AI development, incentivized by company incentives, create significant ethical risks, and companies often struggle to regulate AI at a pace that matches its development, leading to unchecked consequences, whether they be privacy violations or biased algorithms. And last point on competition. Note that competition isn't important because this is only existent to prevent corporations from abusing their competitors. In this case, I'll take that later. It is ironically the government that stops competition as a whole. Competition doesn't matter when the government does not have bad intentions anyway to raise prices and such. And also note that there's no need to make more versions of the same AI for competition or market incentive factors. Yes?
How is violating privacy related to the speed of development?
We think that when companies decide to push the development consistently and when they're not checking for factors because they want to cut costs and they're driven by the market incentives that you guys mentioned, they want to outcompete their competitors by releasing this new model of the AI quickly. They have an incentive to release the new model quickly, and this means that they're willing to trade off things like customer privacy or whatnot. On to the two main questions of today's debate. Question one: in which world do we better sustain and leverage AI? We tell you publicly funded AI developments would most likely have an open access and enabling researchers, nonprofits, and smaller nations to benefit. Without profit-driven entities leading the charge, there will be less risk of monopolies or excessive corporate influence over the policy and the society, and the concentration of AI capabilities in a few corporations creates dependency and limits competition. A publicly available model then further ensures that no single entity controls essential AI technologies. Slowing innovation allows time for more thorough oversight and regulation, ensuring that AI systems are safe, equitable, and truly beneficial to the public, including accounting things like privacy violation. Importantly, slowing down doesn't mean halting the progress altogether. It more means like general AI developments that directly benefit the public, such as healthcare diagnostics or public infrastructure that can still exist under government direction. This controlled pace prevents the disruptive scenarios framed by the opposition, such as exploitative AI systems or politics. Now, the second question of the debate is which side has a better facilitator that is reliable. Opposition tells us that governments are not reliable actors due to arbitrary political factors or whatnot. In the same way that opposition relies on the government to regulate AI systems, to monitor their uses, and ensure that there are no exploitative programs or whatnot, the same government will be the one controlling, and we are not defending this policy in states that are far more corrupt or poor. We are saying that if opposition has the right to be able to give the burden to the government to regulate AI systems, we should be also able to give the burden to the government to control the AI and manage the AI in effective ways. Governments can collaborate with scientists, researchers, and experts to supplement their technical expertise, just as organizations like NASA successfully recruit and compensate experts to drive innovations. Governments can do the same in AI development. This ensures that the process is led by skilled professionals, not politicians, where arbitrary political factors would come in, that provide the necessary human capital to achieve progress while maintaining accountability. Thank you.
That politicians are vulnerable to specific voter demographics. When AI replaces the majority of jobs, most constituents are opposed to AI implementation. This worsens development of AI as long as it's government that makes the decision, and we believe that this leads to fundamental lack of development under side propositions world. Proud to oppose. Moving on to the two main clashes in this debate. First, AI development and human progression. I think that it is quite clear at this point of the debate that side proposition has to defend a world where they have minimal development of AI resource due to lack of competition and voter demographic driven incentive refraining them from developing AIs. We think it's very uncharitable for one side proposition claims that they're going to have no side effects and the same amount of development under their world, where government takes on all of these AI developing projects, right? I think this was clearly mechanized by our previous two speakers. No need to elaborate. Let's move on. We believe that side opposition trying to complain about how we lack accessibility is something that we can turn into a benefit in return. AI, even if it's not accessible for every single user, every single citizen in the status quo, we think it still brings a trickle-down effect. So at the end of the day, it affects most of the people and raises the bar of living. We think that this, at the end of the day, brings upon better human progression. That's why we believe that we can take this as a clear, tangible benefit. This debate. No, thank you. Then let's move on to talk about actors. Companies have incentive to cater for majority and the society. More people using the products, regardless being poor or rich, or is the main objective of these companies. Therefore, they will lower entry barriers and lower membership fees. That is to say, AI companies will need individuals to settle to these rapidly changing societies in order for them to have a wider customer pool and in order for them to maintain a positive reputation within the public. But especially in things like AI, more people means easier and faster development due to data mining and more effective researching. That is why companies have the incentive to cater for not only the rich, but also the poor. Not only that, companies simply have a better chance of development that is not replaceable by government managed products because they have actually something called competition. I'll take a POI before I move on.
We are telling you that slow improvement is not halting the development process altogether, and we are ensuring things like privacy violations that corporations usually don't, and B, political factors won't make the government entity unreliable because that is the same entity the opposition bench trusts to make
regulations. So why is side government presenting a worse counterfactual? Let me move on. Why side government is giving us an unfair fiat that a government will for no reason will go get re-elected will simply cater to all customers and societal development in general. Their only incentive is voter-driven. This means that they have no incentive to further develop AI as long as more than 50% of your citizen is satisfied with the status quo. We think that side government is simply dropping such detrimental chances of societal development by them saying that government will take over these AI development projects. So even if we bite the bullet and concede to side proposition's very best case, their slow development at the end of the day results in the same harm of dropping a chance for societal development because they have less and less incentives where politicians will enact policies that actually fund these AI developing projects, right? You halt because citizens do not want a development because it takes jobs away. I think that's pretty clear. Let me move on to the second clash. How do we counter harms and side effects during the development? Side proposition continues mentions. Panel, note that side proposition cannot win this debate by running away from the benefits of AI development, hiding under irrelevant harms like cyber crimes. We believe that such cyber crimes are problems of users rather than AI itself. It can be easily addressed by increasing policing. Their complaint about technological developments requires substantial intervention of government. Let's give them a simple refutation and resolution. Increase policing. They provide no link between speed of development and privacy issues. That is why we believe side effects of proposition that is suggested so far is something that is not relevant to this debate. Proud to
Debate 101. You can't win a debate by mentioning a problem that is irrelevant to the motion. Meaning that the only problem analysis we get from government is that there are things like privacy, misuse of AI. All these things are simply irrelevant to the speed of AI development. Those things can be tackled through limitations, sure, but we have other things such as policing or other legal laws that ensure that those things doesn't happen in the first place. We don't think that is the right stance coming from government from the get-go of today's debate. With that said, two things I want to talk about. First on accessibility, second on does a quick AI development benefit or harm. First, let's start with accessibility because this is a really important class. Because at the end of the day, whether you have benefits or harm, you have to prove that everyone has access to this technology. Note that accessibility can only work when there's external check and balances, meaning that as long as there is no need to do so, you have no incentive to make AI accessible. That is why government, who is the sole provider of AI, have no incentive whatsoever to develop AI and lower the price. But what about companies? Companies survive by competing. In order to earn profit and stay relevant, they lower their price but increase the quality because that is how they compete against other companies. That is to say that technology can only be accessible under our side where companies have competition, and that is the sole check and balance that we have that they fail to acknowledge. But second, but they tell us that politicians have to appeal to just the majority. Because that's how they get reelected. But what about the very minority that actually needs the technology? Companies have incentive to share to everyone because the more users they have, the better product they reach due to things like data mining. Note that all these things are already stated by the deputy. The whip never talked about this. That is why we think they can never win in the accessibility clash. Second, then does quick AI actually benefit or harm? We have told you so many things. There's pressing urgent problems such as global warming, things like poverty that kills people on a daily basis and hurts people in a daily basis. Those things need immediate address. That is why we can't wait for things. We also told you in Ian's speech that these politicians are likely to go against AI because citizens are also against AI due to things like unemployment or whatever. We think as long as these things are true, we think the short-term harm during the development can be weighed over the long-term benefit of solving these problems because we think their case is relevant. We win today's debate.
We proved two main things in this debate. Firstly, governments are the best actors to limit research and development in fields that pose significant threats to society, which applies to AI as well. And secondly, they're also able to provide much more accessible technology. On the first point, we've proven how by proactively guiding AI development and regulating it from the government from the get-go, we preemptively ensure that it serves societal needs and complements existing systems. In contrast, on their side, AI regulation is only retroactive and only responds to harm after the fact in a status quo where there are already insufficient discourse and regulations to deal with it. This not only risks exacerbating inequality, but can also be disruptive to traditional institutions that lack the resources or time to adapt to unregulated and profit-driven advancements. This came out in PM and deputy, but was never responded to by opposition. Therefore, we can take this point. And furthermore, there are significant risks associated with AI like deepfakes and cyber attacks, which we can assume would not be sufficiently dealt with on opposition as we proved it and as they did not respond. But then what do they claim in contrast? That we're using an unstrategic counterfactual because governments will be voter driven. Myself and Whip have already both told you that political factors will not make the government entity unreliable because this is the same entity the opposition trusts to make the regulations for AI, which is arguably a harder job, as instead of regulating it from the get-go, you have to react retroactively and try to track what all of these companies are doing. Suggesting such regulations will also be voter driven unless they're changing the whole government system. So do we have any response to this? No, this is never given, and we can assume that this point stands, therefore it's symmetric. So then, on the second main point on accessibility, we have directly proven how governments have an incentive to make products accessible, as their role is to protect citizens and develop technologies that can benefit all citizens. They can also be directly called out by the citizens on this. Companies, on the other hand, they have zero incentive to make their products accessible so long as they can even get enough profit from just catering to the rich to be able to sustain their company by making random AR glasses. Making things free, on the other hand, does absolutely nothing to give them profit. We already see this happening. While the basic versions of ChatGPT is free on Status Quo, the premium plan is literally like $20 a month, which not everyone can afford, right? This only exacerbates wealth gaps. In conclusion, as we're able to prove both accessibility and how the government is able to actively prevent cyber attacks or other harms like this, we're the side that takes this debate. Thank you.